Subways have this way of turning people into art. Something about the hazy light and people's expressions make them look like paintings. I'm not the first person to make this connection, with our projects like 16th Century Tube and Subway Hands showing how introspective faces and expressive hands in subways create painterly images. These photos are sometimes mistaken for accidental Renaissance, a genre of photographs found in listicles and across social media. They can be aesthetically similar, but accidental Renaissance photos are more fortuitous, a combination of chance elements straight out of 16th century Florence, and not just of the Italian Renaissance, but also images reminiscent of the later Baroque and Northern European art movements. Sometimes it's a face or clothes that makes the subject look timeless, but more often, it's the conventions of composition and light that transform the photographs into paintings. Some of the earliest photographs deemed accidental Renaissance seem to depict pure chaos. They were taken in arenas full of people and dramatic action and intense emotions, like in politics, festivals, protests, or sports settings. We might associate these photographs with the Renaissance due to the era's frescoes, murals full of hundreds of figures stretching over chapel walls and ceilings. Or maybe it's the busy festivities and not so festivities of the Dutch and Flemish Renaissance. As chaotic as all these islands can be, more often than not, you're drawn in because there's a focal point. Maybe it's all the people looking or pointing towards the center of action. You see this a lot in sports photos, or it's one face lit amidst many, or a break in the pattern, such as these shirtless men standing in a crowd of covered women during a Festivals of Colors game. There's also a trail of water curved towards the men, drawing your eye towards the focal point. The Fibonacci spiral is also sometimes used to highlight composition, claiming a mathematical case for why something is beautiful. But maybe more relevant than any hard rules about ratios is simply how the image instinctually feels. This is a 2008 shot of Frank Lampard and his Chelsea teammates celebrating his goal. It was taken only days after his mother's death. But even if you didn't know his story, you can see there is resignation in his face, if only for a second. As some have pointed out, the emotion and poses are reminiscent of art of Jesus taken down from the cross. He's directly lit, while his teammates fall into shadow on either side of him. They seem to hold him up, grounding the composition. Similarly, the High Renaissance masters used triangular and pyramidal structures to bring a sense of balance and stability to their paintings. As we move from the Renaissance to Mannerism to Baroque, we see more asymmetry, distortion of poses, melodrama. Baroque artists captured action through contorted figures and high contrast, but more in the dramatic Baroque lighting later. The subjects are often crowded in the foreground with a limited view of the background. This Caravaggio painting depicts the story's climax, the moment an angel stops Abraham from sacrificing his son Isaac. Here too is a triangular composition, but this time, the diagonals emphasize the tension as the angel grabs Abraham's arm and Isaac twists in horror. There's a struggle at the heart of every captivating story, and this seems to be why sports and political conflicts, with their heightened action and strong emotions of triumph and despair, make for such dynamic photos. Athletes may also be relevant here because of their physicality. The Italian Renaissance was inspired by art from ancient Greece and Rome, including the era's idealized figures. Michelangelo especially loved muscles on men, women, babies. Art with classical mythological themes may be second only to religious Christian art, but even those are often in a classical style, such as Michelangelo's David. Even though this is the David of and Goliath fame, as you can see with his slaying, he is very much in the tradition of the classical hero sculpture. So some accidental Renaissance photos are reminiscent of religious art of and preceding the Renaissance, but very loosely reminiscent, like a modern rendition of Madonna and child paintings. Also reverent expressions, the creation of Adam, halos. But as we go further north to the Dutch Golden Age and Baroque movements, you see more genre art depicting everyday life, ordinary people, not gods. The modern counterpart would be photographs of these quieter domestic scenes of people eating, working, taking care of each other. Humans doing what we've done for thousands of years. Building upon earlier centuries' unrealistic perspective and flat figures, Renaissance artists achieved realism in their paintings in part through accurate depth and dimension. Artists used techniques like believable perspective lines, scale, and shading to create a more realistic rendition of three-dimensional space and volume. They didn't have camera lenses to create depth of field, so in these paintings, you wouldn't see this shallow depth where anything in front of or behind the subject is blurry. Accidental Renaissance photos then tend to have deeper depth of field, with more of the image in focus. But even in paintings, things further back are smaller, blurrier, have less detail and color. In Leonardo da Vinci's Salvator Mundi, Jesus' blessing hand is in focus, while his face is further back and softer. This soft transition between colors is a technique called fumato. The rise of oil paint, with its longer drying time than egg tempera, allowed for smooth blending. Painters could create subtle hues with underpainting and building transparent layers of color. The shadows on the face were created with semi-opaque pigments and several layers of glazes, creating gradients that, as Da Vinci said, blend without strokes or lines in the manner of smoke. But maybe the most relevant aspect for a photograph that looks like a painting is the light, and in some cases, how the light is edited. We're not looking for a high dynamic range HDR photo, in which several exposures are combined to create an image that retains rich details from the brightest highlights to the darkest shadows. As punchy as these photos can be, a painterly photo would have less contrast and clarity. They might not even be perfectly exposed. They might be taken on a lower resolution phone camera or with only a natural light source. This photo, yes, looks like a biblical plague, but also notice the uniform light and low contrast, how much of the image is in the midtones rather than pure white or black. Here, the highlights are protected to preserve detail, and the brightest points in the photo are actually not that bright. In his writings, Da Vinci disapproves of any extremes of too much or too little light. He recommends the light of approaching evenings, cloudy days, or windows screened with cloth for consistency, generating a moderate light with little difference in the light and shade. Such diffusion of light desaturates colors, so these photographs and their artistic predecessors often have muted, earthy palettes of black, brown, gray, orange, yellow. But at the same time, the golden hue we associate with old paintings is a result of aging varnish. Restorations reveal how many artists originally used a much more vibrant palette than we see today, as seen in this Mona Lisa copy. Like artists, photographers and cinematographers today use diffusion, large light sources relative to the subject, bouncing light, and editing to create soft gradations from light to dark. Fumato creates balanced photos, even more so when the light is diffused through cloud, smoke, or fog, transforming the light into an otherworldly glow. But if we reduce the ambient light, there are photographs lit as if by a spotlight on a theater stage, with much of the image falling into darkness. There's little to no light bouncing back from the environment. Parts of the subjects, not even in their entirety, surface from the swaths of black. The light is brightest on the most important parts of the composition. Here, it's this demonstrator in Sudan reciting a protest poem during a blackout, illuminated only by the crowd's phones. Baroque artist Caravaggio is best known for this dramatic use of chiaroscuro, the technique of using the contrast of light and dark to create three-dimensional forms. But even here, the whites are rarely pure white. In this painting called The Supper of Emmaus, the brightest points are reserved for the highlight on the directly lit areas of white cloth, the shell, the elbow jutting towards us in surprise, and the reflection of the pitcher of water, distinguishing the texture of glass from the white matte cloth. Much of the contrast then is created by the deep shadows. The darkness not only dims the room, but also much of the subject's faces. The shadows cast by the objects on the table and the folds within the drapery are essential in creating the illusion of weight, of dimension. This level of contrast throws a dramatic scene into sharp detail, emphasizing a moment of intense emotion. As biographer Andrew Graham Dixon puts it, Caravaggio's images freeze time, but also seem to hover on the brink of their own disappearance. Faces are brightly illuminated. Details emerge from the darkness with such uncanny clarity that they might be hallucinations, yet always the shadows encroach, the pools of blackness that threaten to obliterate all. Looking at his pictures is like looking at the world by flashes of lightning. Caravaggio had a preference for a singular light source, often from the upper left corner, as if from a setting sun through a high window or a raised lantern. Such light puts the far side of the face in shadow. If the light is at a 45-degree angle from the subject and higher than the subject's eye level, the shadow of the nose and cheekbone connect to create a triangular area of light on the cheek. This effect was popularized by Rembrandt's portraits and is now a fundamental lighting technique in photography because it can be a beautiful way to emphasize the planes of a face. Rembrandt was influenced by Caravaggio's chiaroscuro and dark backgrounds, but while Caravaggio's light is often harder with a sharper delineation between light and shadows, Rembrandt often has a more subtle, gradual light fall-off. Less drama, more melancholy. Renaissance art has inspired photographic conventions throughout the centuries. The artistry of these painters or photographers is hardly ever accidental. Artists study technique, composition, color theory, anatomy, light, in service of their craft. And we shouldn't undermine the practice it takes photographers to develop their eye and skills, how they frame, adjust their camera in position, and capture a striking moment. But I think we also love accidental Renaissance photos because of the disparity between intention and result. A spontaneous moment, resulting in an image the masters could only achieve with painstaking effort. It shows that there's art all around us, even if it is only by chance.